So the main goal of this trial was to do a number of things. It was one, to randomize patients with T-cell acute lymphoblastic leukemia and T-cell acute lymphoblastic lymphoma to receive or not receive the proteasome inhibitor Bortezomib on a modified augmented BFM backbone. And this was children and young adults. The cure rates for children and young adults with T-cell leukemia and lymphoma have improved dramatically over the past 70 years, but there are still some patients that are not cured. And most patients who relapsed are not salvageable. So one of our goals in the Children's Oncology group has been to move new therapies to the front line. There are promising preclinical data, good biologic rationale, and data in the ALL07P1 clinical trial in relapsed T-ALL and T-cell lymphoblastic lymphoma, suggesting Bortezomib was promising. So the primary goal of the study was to move Bortezomib to the front line and randomize patients to receive or not receive 4 doses of it in 2 different blocks of therapy. Another major goal of the trial was to try to eliminate cranial radiation in the majority of children. On the predecessor trial to this trial, ALL0434, and in a lot of trials throughout the world, children with T-cell leukemia and lymphoma receive cranial radiation, which has a lot of long-term side effects, as well as short-term side effects. So we changed the chemotherapy backbone with the goal of eliminating radiation. It was a COG-initiated clinical trial that was open at COG sites and centers in the US, and then also centers in New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and a few places in Europe, over 200 centers. A couple things that we found so far. First, I'd just like to highlight that these are 3-year results, so we need to see how much they hold up with longer time. We found that Bortezomib had a trend towards improved survival benefit, both EFS and overall survival in patients with T-cell lymphoblastic leukemia and lymphoma. If we looked by disease type, breaking it down to leukemia and lymphoma, we found there was a survival advantage, both event-free survival and overall survival in the lymphoblastic lymphoma subjects. We also found the overall outcomes for patients we defined as standard risk or intermediate risk on the Bortezomib arm were extremely good. Patients with very high-risk disease did very poorly, and that was defined mainly based on having a refractory to chemotherapy, defined as end consolidation MRD being positive in the T-cell lymphoblastic leukemia patients, or having a poor radiographic response in the T-cell lymphoblastic lymphoma patients. We did find, if we compared similar patients on that trial to the predecessor trial who received radiation on the predecessor trial and did not receive radiation on the new trial, the one that we presented in ASH, that we were able to successfully eliminate radiation in those patients because outcomes were similar. The one thing we also saw, though, is as we intensified therapy overall, the overall survival on the current trial, comparing all patients to the predecessor trial, was a little bit worse. Interestingly, the event-free survival was not. So we really need to follow up a little more time to know which of those will hold true. Is it both the event-free survival and overall survival were slightly worse on the current trial, or with time will it turn out that they'll kind of be similar, and we'll just have to follow that with time. So the big conclusions were Bortezomib is a potentially active agent in T-cell lymphoblastic disease, especially T-cell lymphoblastic lymphoma, and that you can eliminate radiation in most patients with T-cell leukemia by modifying your backbone. I think we're going to have to see if they hold up with time. If they do, then it may be that we move to a world where Bortezomib becomes standard of care for newly diagnosed patients with T-cell lymphoblastic lymphoma. The control arm on the T-cell lymphoblastic lymphoma compared to the prior trial did worse, so we need to kind of figure out why the patients who did not receive Bortezomib did worse in the predecessor trial. But the difference in survival between the 2 arms on the ALL1231 trial was pretty striking. So if it holds up with time, it may change the standard of care. The only way to have trials like this be successful is from large international cooperative groups that bring centers together to try to ask questions in rare populations.